The afternoon sun filtered through the smudged windows of Sweetie's bakery as Julian Thorne stood at the counter, his voice barely rising above a ragged whisper. "I am sorry, but I need to cancel the birthday cake order for Saturday." His rough, callous fingers trembled slightly as he clutched his worn wallet, his knuckles turning white with the effort of holding his composure. The bakery, with its warm sense of yeast and sugar, had always been a place of comfort for Julian, but today it felt like the stage for another crushing defeat. "Cancel? But Mr. Thorne, we have already started on the baseball design. Toby is turning 8, right?" Martha, the bakery owner, peered over her reading glasses with genuine concern. She had known Julian since they were kids and had watched him struggle as a single father since Toby's other dad walked out 3 years ago. "I know, and I am so sorry. Something came up with the car, and Julian's voice cracked. He couldn't bring himself to say that his hours had been cut at the warehouse where he worked shifts as an EMT, or that the choice had come down to the custom cake or keeping the heat on for the month. "I will still pay the deposit. I know it is short notice." What neither man noticed was the imposing figure in the corner booth, his attention caught by the quiet, desperate exchange. Dante Moretti had stopped at the small-town bakery on a whim while his driver filled up the SUV at the gas station across the street. Dressed in a sharp, tailored black Mafia suit and a crisp white-collared shirt that cost more than most people's annual rent, he seemed dangerously out of place among the gingham curtains and faded linoleum. The head of the Moretti crime family was passing through on his way to a sit-down with rival territory bosses, his mind usually occupied with turf wars and union contracts. But something about the man's posture, broad shoulders rounded forward as if bearing the weight of the entire world, made him listen more carefully. "Don't worry about the deposit, sweetheart," Martha said, reaching across the counter to squeeze Julian's hand. "You can use it another time. Is Toby very disappointed?" "He doesn't know yet," Julian whispered, wiping quickly at his eyes with the back of his hand. "I will figure something out. Maybe a box mix from the grocery store. I just hate to let him down again." Dante watched as Julian left the bakery, his head held high despite the obvious distress radiating from him. Through the window, Dante saw him climb into a rusting pickup truck, sit motionless for a moment, then rest his forehead against the steering wheel in a moment of private anguish. "Tough situation," Dante stated casually, his voice a low rumble as Martha approached to refill his espresso. "Oh, you have no idea," Martha sighed, glancing toward the door with a heavy heart. "Julian works harder than anyone I know, picking up extra shifts, raising that sweet boy alone. Toby has been talking about this birthday party for months. Baseball theme. He is obsessed. Keeps saying this is the year the scouts will discover him," she added with a sad smile. "Julian has been saving up, but life keeps throwing curveballs at that man." Dante nodded, his espresso forgotten as he gazed out the window with dark, calculating eyes. At 38, he had more power and cash than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. His legitimate businesses donated millions each year to launder his reputation, but it had been ages since he had connected with the human impact of financial struggle. His consiglieras handled the details, he just authorized the transfers. "What kind of cake was it going to be?" he asked suddenly. "Baseball field design. Green frosting for the grass, white for the bases. Toby's name on the pitcher's mound." Martha's eyes brightened. "I was going to make little fondant players, too. That boy deserves something special." Dante reached into his black suit jacket and pulled out a thick leather wallet. "I would like to pay for the cake and whatever else would make a great party." Martha stared at him, recognition slowly dawning as she looked past the expensive suit to the dangerous stillness of the man. "You are just someone who remembers what it is like to look forward to a birthday," he interrupted with a ghost of a smile. "My father was out of the picture, and my mother scrubbed floors. There were years when a cake was a luxury we couldn't afford." Within minutes, the plan expanded. Not just the cake, but a complete party at the local baseball field. Dante made calls on his encrypted phone while Martha contacted Julian's best friend, Mark, to coordinate. By the time he left the bakery, Dante had delayed his meeting with the other families for the weekend. Something about this situation had stirred memories he had long buried beneath violence and power plays. 3 days later, Toby Thorne woke up on his 8th birthday, expecting little more than his father's traditional scrambled eggs. The past few months had been full of disappointments. Baseball camp canceled, their planned move to a better duplex delayed, his dad's increasingly exhausted smiles. He had overheard enough to understand that money was tight, though the concept remained abstract to his young mind. "Ready for your birthday surprise?" Julian asked, his eyes sparkling in a way Toby hadn't seen in months. "Eggs," he guessed, already grateful for the small tradition. "Better. Get dressed." Baseball gear today. Toby's heart raced as they drove toward the town's baseball field. He spotted balloons tied to the fence and a small gathering of people. "Dad, what is happening?" Julian simply smiled, emotion making it impossible to speak. When they parked, Toby recognized his friends from school, his little league teammates, and several adults from the neighborhood. "Surprise!" they shouted as he approached. The baseball field had been transformed. A large white tent housed a table laden with Italian catering and drinks. Baseball-themed decorations hung everywhere. Toby's friends rushed forward, baseball mitts already on their hands. "We are having your party at a real baseball field," Julian explained, his voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. Someone very kind, wanted to make your birthday special." Toby was speechless, his eyes wide as he took in the scene, especially the magnificent cake centerpiece, exactly like the one he had described to his dad months ago while flipping through Martha's cake catalog. What Toby didn't immediately notice was the imposing man standing off to the side in a black suit and open-collared white shirt, watching with an unexpected lump in his throat. Dante Moretti had sanctioned takeovers and ordered strikes without blinking, but the pure joy on this child's face affected him in ways he couldn't articulate. The day unfolded with impromptu baseball games, expensive presents, and gourmet food. Local coaches, paid generously by an anonymous donor, volunteered to run drills with the kids. A professional photographer captured moments that would become cherished memories. Through it all, Dante remained in the background, speaking briefly with Julian to explain his impulse at the bakery. "I cannot possibly thank you enough," Julian said, watching Toby run the bases with abandon, his face flushed with excitement. "You don't need to," Dante replied simply, his voice rougher than intended. "Sometimes life deals unfair hands. I have been fortunate enough to stack the deck in my favor. It is only right to redistribute the chips occasionally." As the afternoon light began to fade and children reluctantly headed home, Toby approached Dante, whom he had been eyeing curiously throughout the day. "Dad says you are the reason we had this amazing party," Toby said, looking up at the mob boss with unabashed directness. "He says you are like a baseball scout, but for people who need help." Dante crouched down to meet the boy at eye level, his expensive suit straining slightly. "Your dad is the real hero. I just pitched in for one day. He is batting for you every single day." Toby considered this with the seriousness only an 8-year-old can muster. Then, with the unpredictable impulse of childhood, he threw his arms around the man's neck in a fierce hug. "This was the best day ever," he whispered. Dante froze, his hands hovering uncertainly before he carefully returned the embrace. Something shifting in his chest, a wall crumbling that he hadn't even realized he had built to survive his world. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, none of them could have predicted how this chance encounter would change all their lives. The story was just beginning. The Monday following Toby's birthday celebration, Dante Moretti sat in his executive office overlooking the skyline, unable to focus on the laundering reports his underboss had prepared. His mind kept drifting back to the baseball field, to Toby's uninhibited joy and Julian's grateful, tear-filled eyes. Something had awakened in him, a recognition of purpose beyond territory margins and illicit operations. "Mr. Moretti." His consigliere Paolo appeared at the door. "Your 10 o'clock sit-down was cancelled, but there is something else that needs your attention." Dante nodded absently, still staring out the window. "Boss, are you all right? You have been distracted since you returned from that trip." Dante turned, regarding his efficient right-hand man of 7 years. Had he ever asked about Paolo's family, his aspirations beyond managing the family's enforcement schedule? Paolo, do we have any legitimate programs that directly help working families? Not just donations to the church or the police fund, but something more personal. Paolo blinked in surprise. The family trust handles our civic work, but it is mostly large grants to established organizations to keep the feds off our back. Nothing specifically targeting individual families that I am aware of. Let's change that, Dante said decisively. Set up a meeting with the legal team and find out if we have contacts at Mercy Hospital in Northbridge. Northbridge? That is nearly 2 hours away, I am aware. It is important. What Dante couldn't explain, even to himself, was the persistent image of Julian's determined face as he had tried to cancel that cake. There had been no self-pity, just quiet dignity in the face of impossible choices. It reminded him of his own mother, who had cleaned houses and waited tables to provide for him after his father was killed in a hit, never complaining despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. Meanwhile, in Northbridge, Julian was experiencing his own lingering effects from the birthday party. Toby couldn't stop talking about Mr. Dante and the amazing day. His enthusiasm was infectious, but it also stirred uncomfortable feelings. While deeply grateful for the stranger's kindness, Julian prided himself on self-reliance. Accepting such generosity from a wealthy stranger, however well-intentioned, had left him feeling both grateful and somewhat diminished as a provider. Dad, can we send Mr. Dante a thank you card? I made this in art class. Toby held up a construction paper creation covered in glitter and baseball stickers. Julian smiled, ruffling his hair. That is thoughtful, buddy, but I am not sure how to reach him. Ms. Martha at the bakery might know. She talked to him a lot. The suggestion was reasonable, but Julian hesitated. The bakery had become a place of mixed emotions, the site of his humiliation and subsequent rescue. Later that week, Julian's supervisor at the ambulance depot called him into the office. With his stomach in knots, Julian prepared for more bad news about reduced shifts. Julian, I have received a rather unusual request. The chief began, his expression unreadable. The Moretti Civic Trust has approached the department about establishing a new medical training scholarship program. They specifically asked if we had staff interested in advancing their medical education to become registered nurses or nurse practitioners. Julian stared blankly. That is wonderful for the department, but the representative mentioned you by name. The room seemed to tilt. Me? There must be some mistake. No mistake. Apparently, Mr. Moretti himself requested that you be informed of this opportunity. The chief slid a folder across the desk. Full tuition for an RN program plus a stipend for living expenses. They are calling it the Second Chance Initiative. Julian's hands trembled as he opened the folder. Inside was an official letter from the Moretti Trust along with program details that seemed tailored specifically to his situation. Classes scheduled around his parenting duties, childcare assistance, and mentoring support. The generosity was overwhelming but also discomforting. Why him? This is... I don't know what to say. Say you will apply, the chief encouraged. You are one of our hardest workers, Julian. You deserve this chance. That evening, as Toby completed his homework at the kitchen table of their small apartment, Julian paced with the scholarship papers spread before him. What is wrong, Dad? You keep walking back and forth like Mrs. Peterson's cat when it's hungry. Julian smiled despite his turmoil. Just thinking, buddy, about the papers. Is it bills again? His young face grew serious, displaying an awareness no 8-year-old should have about financial struggles. No, actually, it is something good, potentially. But complicated. Toby nodded sagely. Like when Coach says I have great potential, but complicated mechanics. Julian laughed, the tension breaking momentarily. Something like that. The next day, he found himself standing once again in Sweetie's bakery, this time with purpose rather than defeat. Martha, I need to ask you something about Mr. Moretti. Martha smiled knowingly. I was wondering when you would come by. That man was quite taken with you and Toby. Julian blushed, rubbing the back of his neck. Not like that. He has established a scholarship, and somehow my name was specifically mentioned. It feels, I don't know, targeted. I am grateful, but also confused. Martha wiped her hands on her apron. He asked a lot of questions about you after you left that day. Not in a creepy way. she added hastily. He seemed genuinely concerned. Said something about seeing his own mother's struggle in you. His mother? Apparently, she raised him alone, worked multiple jobs. He said watching you reminded him of what she went through. This revelation shifted something in Julian's perspective. Not charity then, but empathy born of shared experience despite the vast difference in their current circumstances. As Julian debated the scholarship offer over the following days, Dante was implementing broader changes inspired by his encounter with the Thorns. The Moretti Trust launched a new initiative focused on supporting working single parents, particularly those pursuing education in healthcare fields. The pilot program would begin in Northbridge before expanding. 2 weeks after Toby's birthday, Julian was startled by a knock at his apartment door. Opening it revealed Martha from the bakery holding a large envelope. "Special delivery," Martha announced with a conspiratorial smile. "Someone dropped this off for you." Inside was a brief note on heavy, expensive stationery. "Mr. Thorne, I hope you will consider the scholarship opportunity. It is not charity. It is an investment in someone who clearly has the determination and heart that our healthcare system desperately needs. No strings attached, no obligations. Your decision entirely." Separately, Toby left quite an impression on me. "Enclosed is a season pass for the home games. My driver can arrange transportation for any games you wish to attend. Again, no obligations, simply an opportunity if you choose to accept it. With respect, Dante Moretti." P.S. The baseball scout joke was the best I have heard in years. Julian sat heavily on the worn sofa, the note in one hand and the season tickets, which must have cost thousands, in the other. "Well," Martha prompted, "he is either the most generous man alive or what?" Julian shook his head. "I don't know. Why us? There are thousands of struggling families. What makes us special?" Martha considered this. "Maybe you are not special. No offense. Maybe you are just the one he happened to see. Sometimes being seen is enough." That night after Toby went to bed, Julian made his decision. He would accept the scholarship but decline the baseball tickets. Education was an investment in their future. The tickets felt too personal, too much like he was being bought, or something that crossed a boundary he wasn't comfortable breaching. He crafted a careful email to the trust, accepting the scholarship with profound thanks, explaining his decision about the tickets, and attaching a photo of Toby's thank you card. The response came within minutes despite the late hour. "The scholarship is yours. Congratulations. As for the tickets, I understand your hesitation, but please reconsider. Not for yourself, but for Toby. I grew up without such opportunities and would have given anything for such experiences with my father figure. The driver is professional and trustworthy. Perhaps one game as a trial. No ulterior motives, I assure you." DM Julian stared at his phone screen, conflicted emotions swirling. What exactly was happening here? Was this simply the whim of a bored mob boss trying to clean his conscience, or something more meaningful? And why did the distinction matter so much to him? The crack of the bat echoed through the stadium as the slugger sent the ball soaring toward the outfield bleachers. Toby leapt to his feet, nearly spilling his soda, his face alight with unbridled excitement. "Dad, did you see that 3-run homer?" He turned to Julian, his eyes wide with wonder. "These seats are amazing. We can see everything." Julian nodded, smiling despite himself. After 3 weeks of polite refusal, he had finally relented to Toby's pleas and Dante's persistent offers. Now sitting in premium box seats behind home plate, seats that would have cost more than a month's rent, he had to admit the experience was magical. "Mr. Peterson at school won't believe I was this close," Toby exclaimed, clutching his new team cap, a purchase Julian had allowed as a special treat. "Can we take a picture to show him?" As Julian raised his phone to capture Toby's beaming face with the field behind him, a discreet cough from their left caught his attention. "Excuse me," said an elegant older woman in a team jacket, her hair perfectly coiffed. "Would you like me to take a photo of both of you together?" "That would be wonderful." "Thank you," Julian replied, handing over his phone. The woman snapped several pictures, then returned the device with a warm, calculating smile. Your son is having quite the time, first baseball game. First professional game, Toby answered before Julian could speak. We are here because Mr. Dante gave us tickets. He is a rich boss who helped when Dad had to cancel my birthday cake. And now Dad is going to be a real nurse because of his scholarship. Julian flushed with embarrassment at Toby's artless explanation of their circumstances. Toby, buddy, we don't need to share our personal business. The woman's eyes crinkled with amusement. No need for embarrassment. Dante has always had a good eye for recognizing worthy investments. Julian's attention sharpened. You know Mr. Moretti? Know him? I raised him. The woman extended her hand, her grip firm. Rosa Moretti. Dante's mother. Julian nearly choked on his breath. Mrs. Moretti, I had no idea you would be here. Rosa waved dismissively. Dante doesn't know either. I keep a season ticket in the next section over. Been coming to games for 40 years. Through thick and thin. When Dante mentioned he had given tickets to a nursing student and his baseball-loving son, I was curious. She winked at Toby. Wanted to see who caught my son's attention. Toby, oblivious to the undertones of the conversation, launched into an enthusiastic recounting of his birthday party. Rosa listened with genuine interest, her shrewd eyes occasionally darting to Julian's increasingly uncomfortable expression. When Toby dashed off to buy a foam finger from a passing vendor with carefully counted money from his own allowance, Rosa turned to Julian. He is overstepping, isn't he? My son. Julian hesitated. I am incredibly grateful for the opportunities Mr. Moretti has provided. The scholarship will change our lives. But, Rosa prompted, but I can't help wondering why us? Why me? It feels personal in a way that makes me uneasy. Rosa nodded thoughtfully. Dante lost his father when he was 6. I worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. No time for baseball games then, she added with a touch of sadness. He built his empire from nothing, though it is a complicated business. But success came at a cost. He is brilliant with strategy, hopeless with people. Especially since he realized he couldn't live the life others expected of him. Julian hadn't known much about Dante's personal life. The revelation somehow made him more human, less the infallible benefactor. When he called me about your situation, it was the first time in years I had heard genuine emotion in his voice, Rosa continued. Whatever his reasons, they are sincere. But, she fixed Julian with a penetrating look. You are right to maintain boundaries. Kindness shouldn't create obligation. Before Julian could respond, Toby returned proudly, sporting his new foam finger. The conversation shifted back to baseball, but Rosa's words lingered in Julian's mind throughout the evening. After the game, a thrilling victory, they were escorted to a waiting black sedan by Dante's personal driver, Giovanni, a grandfatherly man who had charmed Toby with baseball trivia during their drive to the stadium. Did you enjoy the game, young man? Giovanni asked as he held the car door open. Best day ever, Toby declared. Then, with childish directness, is Mr. Dante coming to see us? Giovanni glanced briefly at Julian. Mr. Moretti is currently out of state on business. Oh, Toby's disappointment was palpable. I wanted to thank him and tell him about the home run. I am sure he would like to hear about it, Giovanni replied diplomatically. Perhaps you could write him a letter. The suggestion brightened Toby's mood, and he spent the ride home planning what he would write. Julian remained quiet, processing the unexpected meeting with Rosa and the complex emotions it had stirred. Later that week, Julian began his first classes in the nursing program. The rigorous schedule combined with his continued work shifts left little time for overthinking the Moretti situation. He threw himself into his studies with determination, grateful for the opportunity regardless of its unusual origins. Nearly a month passed without any direct contact from Dante, though the trust staff checked in regularly to ensure the scholarship program was meeting his needs. Toby faithfully sent handwritten letters after each game they attended, addressing them to Mr. Dante at the trust offices. Whether they reached him, Julian couldn't say. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Julian entered the break room to find his coworkers gathered around the television, expressions rapt. What is going on? He asked, setting down his lunch bag. Moretti's new healthcare initiative, answered the dispatcher, gesturing to the screen where Dante was conducting a press conference. He has just pledged $50 million to improve rural and underserved hospitals nationwide. Julian moved closer to the television, studying the man who had so dramatically altered his family's trajectory. On screen, Dante appeared every inch the polished leader, articulate and confident in his black suit and white shirt. Yet Julian noticed something his other audience might miss. A subtle tension in his shoulders, a hint of discomfort behind his media smile. The Moretti Second Chance initiative will focus on both infrastructure improvements and personnel development, Dante was explaining. We have already piloted a nursing scholarship program that is showing promising results. A reporter raised a hand. Mr. Moretti, this represents a significant shift in your organization's focus. What inspired this change? For a brief moment, Dante's composure faltered. Sometimes we need reminders of what truly matters. Community isn't just about business. It is about people. People who make hard choices, who sacrifice daily to care for others. His gaze seemed to look beyond the press corps, as if seeing something or someone else entirely. This initiative honors my mother who worked as a cleaner while raising me, and every parent who has ever stood at a counter making impossible choices between necessities and small joys. Julian felt his cheeks warm as several coworkers turned toward him, the connection suddenly obvious to those who knew his story. He is talking about you, whispered a colleague. You are the inspiration for a $50 million initiative. Overwhelmed, Julian slipped out of the break room, seeking refuge in a quiet corridor. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I hope I didn't overstep by mentioning the scholarship program. Your privacy remains paramount. DM. How had he gotten his number? The foundation paperwork, of course. Julian hesitated before responding. The initiative sounds wonderful. Many families will benefit. Toby and I enjoyed the games, especially meeting your mother. The response came immediately. My mother, Rosa, was there? She introduced herself. Lovely woman. There was a longer pause before. She has always been my best advisor and worst meddler. I apologize if she said anything inappropriate. Julian smiled despite himself. She said you are brilliant with strategy, hopeless with people. Accurate assessment. May I call you? There is something I would like to discuss regarding the trust. Julian's thumb hovered over the phone. A boundary was being crossed, yet he found himself surprisingly comfortable with the shift. I am at work until 6. After Toby's bedtime at 8:30 would be best that evening. After tucking in an exhausted Toby, Julian sat at his small kitchen table, nervously awaiting Dante's call. When his phone rang precisely at 8:30, he took a deep breath before answering. Mr. Thorne, thank you for taking my call. It is Julian. And please call me Julian. Julian, then I am Dante, not Mr. Moretti, he replied, a warmth evident in his deep voice. I wanted to discuss expanding the scholarship program based on your experience so far. Your feedback would be invaluable. For the next hour, they talked about the practical challenges of pursuing education while parenting alone. Julian found himself speaking candidly about childcare difficulties, scheduling conflicts, and the emotional toll of divided attention. Dante listened intently, asking thoughtful questions without the arrogance Julian might have expected from someone in his position. You should be consulting with education experts, Julian said finally. Not a nursing student who has only been in the program for a few weeks. Experts provide theory. You provide reality, Dante replied. That is far more valuable. Their conversation shifted gradually from the scholarship program to more personal topics. Toby's baseball aspirations, Dante's interest in classic cars, books they had both enjoyed. By the call's end, Julian realized with surprise that nearly 3 hours had passed, and that he had laughed more than he had in months. I would like to continue this conversation, Dante said as they prepared to hang up. Perhaps in person if you are comfortable with that. Purely professional, of course, he added hastily. The trust could benefit enormously from your ongoing input. Julian hesitated, aware of crossing into unfamiliar territory. I would be happy to help with the trust, he said carefully, for Toby's sake as much as others. Every child deserves a birthday cake. Autumn painted Northbridge in brilliant hues of red and gold as September gave way to October. In the 6 months since Toby's birthday, life had transformed for the Thorns in ways Julian could never have imagined. His nursing program was challenging but rewarding. Toby was thriving in a new after-school program sponsored by the Moretti Trust, and their financial situation, while still requiring careful management, no longer teetered on the edge of crisis. What had begun as a purely professional relationship with Dante Moretti had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated. Their first in-person meeting after the phone call, coffee at a quiet cafe to discuss scholarship program improvements, had led to dinner the following week to continue the conversation. That dinner had somehow turned into a regular occurrence, with Dante making the 2-hour drive from the city whenever his schedule permitted. "Dad, is Mr. Dante coming tonight?" Toby asked, looking up from his homework at the kitchen table. The question carried no judgment, just curiosity mingled with hope. Over the months, Dante had become a fixture in their lives, bringing a masculine stability that had been missing since Toby's other father departed. "Yes, he is joining us for dinner," Julian replied, checking the lasagna in the oven. "He mentioned bringing those astronomy books you were talking about last time." Toby's face lit up. "Awesome. I need them for my science project. Do you think he would help me build the solar system model, too?" "You can ask him yourself," he answered, trying to keep his tone casual despite the flutter in his stomach. These dinner visits had become the highlight of his week, a fact that both thrilled and terrified him. Dante arrived precisely at 6, wearing his signature black suit and white shirt, carrying not only the promised astronomy books but also a small telescope. The books explained the concepts, but nothing beats seeing the real thing, he explained as Toby launched himself into an enthusiastic greeting. Watching them interact, Dante patiently answering Toby's rapid-fire questions about Jupiter's moons, Julian felt a complicated warmth spread through his chest. For a man who claimed to be hopeless with people, Dante had shown a remarkable gift for connecting with his son. There was no condescension, no performance in his attention, just genuine interest. Later, after Toby had reluctantly gone to bed, extracting a promise from Dante to set up the telescope that weekend, Julian and Dante settled on the small balcony of the apartment, mugs of tea in hand. "The board approved all your suggested changes to the scholarship program," Dante said, his voice quiet in the evening stillness. "The childcare stipend increase, the mentorship network, the emergency fund for unexpected expenses, everything. We are expanding to 5 more hospitals next month." Julian nodded, pride mingling with a touch of sadness. "That is wonderful. Those changes will make such a difference." "But," Dante prompted, attuned now to the nuances of his tone. He hesitated. "I am just realizing that as the program expands, you won't need my input as much. These dinners are conversations. They will naturally come to an end." Dante set down his mug, turning to face him directly. "Is that what you think this is? A consulting relationship, isn't it? At least that is how it started, Julian." His voice had a gentle intensity that made Julian meet his eyes. "I drive 2 hours each way, multiple times a week, to see you and Toby. I have rescheduled sit-downs with syndicate leaders, delegated critical enforcement, and turned down meetings worth millions of dollars. All to eat lasagna at your kitchen table and help an 8-year-old with his homework." His breath caught. "Why?" "Because this," he gestured between them, "is the first real thing I have felt in years. Maybe ever." The silence between them hummed with possibility, with unspoken fears and hopes. Julian had been hurt before, had learned the hard way that fairy tales rarely came true for single gay dads working paycheck to paycheck. Yet here was Dante Moretti, Mafia boss, strategic genius, increasingly the man he thought about first thing each morning, saying words he had stopped believing he would ever hear again. "I am scared," he admitted finally. "Not just for me, but for Toby. He is already so attached to you. If this doesn't work, I understand the stakes," Dante said softly. "I have never been a father figure before. Never wanted to be, truthfully, until I met Toby. Until I met you." Their conversation was interrupted by Julian's phone ringing, the ambulance depot calling him in for an emergency shift. reality reasserting itself as it always did. As Dante prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Think about what I said. We can take this as slowly as you need. Julian nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the possibilities stretching before him. I will. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity. Midterm exams consumed Julian's study time, while Dante faced a crisis with a rival family that required his presence out of state. They spoke daily by phone, but 2 weeks passed without seeing each other in person, the longest separation since their dinners had begun. Toby grew increasingly worried as the days passed without a visit from Mr. Dante. Is he not coming back? He asked one evening, his voice small. Pop said he would come back too, but he didn't. The question pierced Julian's heart. This is different, honey. Dante is just very busy with work right now. He called yesterday, remember? Asked all about your science project. Toby nodded, unconvinced. But what if he forgets about us? He has a big important company and fancy cars and probably lots of friends who are rich like him. The child's insecurity mirrored his own unspoken fears. What place could he and Toby possibly have in Dante Moretti's dangerous world? Despite his assurances, despite the genuine connection they had formed, the gulf between their lives remained vast. That weekend, as Julian helped Toby with his solar system model, his phone chimed with a text from Dante. Situation resolved. May I see you both tomorrow? I have missed you more than I can say. Just as he was about to reply, there was a knock at the apartment door. Opening it revealed Rosa Moretti, Dante's mother, holding a bakery box from Sweeties. Rosa, this is unexpected, Julian said, recovering from his surprise. Good unexpected, I hope? The older woman replied with a smile. Martha mentioned you had been working double shifts this week. Thought you and Toby might appreciate some of her cinnamon rolls. Julian welcomed her in, introducing Toby, who was initially shy but quickly warmed up when Rosa showed interest in his half-completed solar system. Dante was obsessed with space at your age, Rosa told him. Built a rocket in our backyard when he was 10. Nearly set the neighbor's tree on fire during the launch. Toby giggled, delighted by this glimpse of his hero's childhood mishaps. While Toby returned to painting his planets, Rosa turned to Julian with characteristic directness. He is miserable without you, you know. Julian busied himself with making coffee. We have both been busy. His business needed him out of state. The business always needs him. That is the excuse he has used for years to avoid real connection. Rosa accepted the coffee mug with a nod of thanks. What you may not realize is that this is the first time he has ever resented the life keeping him from someone. Julian didn't know how to respond. His feelings for Dante had deepened into something profound, something he hadn't dared name even to himself. Rosa continued, her voice softening. When my husband died, I thought I would never find love again. Too busy, too many responsibilities, too many risks. It took me 12 years to realize those were excuses born of fear. And did you find love again? Rosa's eyes twinkled. Giovanni and I have been married for 26 years now. Giovanni? The driver. Giovanni, Dante's driver now. My husband. Rosa laughed at Julian's expression. Life offers second chances in the most unexpected packages. The question is whether we are brave enough to accept them. After Rosa left, Julian sat on the balcony long into the evening, contemplating second chances and unexpected packages. When his phone rang just after 9, he wasn't surprised to see Dante's name. I am back, he said without preamble. Mother mentioned she visited you today. I hope she behaved herself. Julian smiled. She brought cinnamon rolls and embarrassing childhood stories. Toby was thrilled. And you? Were you thrilled to hear about my pyrotechnic failures? I was glad to know you weren't always perfect. There was a pause. I have never been perfect, Julian. But these past months with you and Toby, I have been better, happier, more myself than I have ever been. The vulnerability in his voice gave Julian courage. We have missed you, both of us. I have been thinking, Dante said carefully. The trust is opening a new office in Northbridge to manage the expanding scholarship program. It would make sense for me to spend more time there to be closer to the project. The project, Julian repeated, a smile in his voice. And to you, he admitted. If that is what you want. 6 months after a cancelled birthday cake had brought them together, Dante and Julian sat side by side on bleachers at Toby's baseball field, watching him practice with his team. The evening was cool, autumn giving way to winter's approach. He is getting better, Dante observed as Toby connected with the ball, sending it sailing over second base. The coaching helps, and the practice field you funded for the league. Dante shrugged off his gratitude, as he always did. Small investment, significant returns. The Moretti way. Julian turned to study his profile in the fading light. Is that how you see us? An investment. He met his gaze, his expression serious. The best I have ever made. But not in the way you mean. He reached for Julian's hand, lacing their fingers together. You and Toby showed me what I had been missing while building my empire. Purpose, connection, joy in simple things. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Toby run bases with his teammates. The past 6 months had brought challenges as they navigated their evolving relationship, balancing Julian's fierce independence with Dante's instinct to solve problems with money and muscle, integrating their vastly different worlds, building Toby's trust that this new family configuration would last. I have something for you, Dante said suddenly, reaching into his jacket pocket. Not what you might think, he added quickly, noting Julian's expression. That conversation is for later when you are ready. He handed him an envelope. Inside, Julian found the deed to a modest house a few blocks from his apartment, close to Toby's school, the hospital, and the park where he played baseball. Dante, I cannot accept this. It is not a gift, he corrected gently. It is an investment property owned by the trust, designated as housing for scholarship recipients. You would be the program administrator, living on-site to mentor future students. Salary commensurate with the position. Of course, Julian narrowed his eyes. You created an entire housing program just to give me a house without making me feel like a charity case. Dante had the grace to look slightly abashed. The program is legitimate. We have been planning it for months. Your advisorship has been invaluable. And the house just happens to have 3 bedrooms, a home office, and a backyard perfect for a telescope. Functional requirements for the program administrator. He replied with mock seriousness before his expression softened. I want to give you and Toby the world, Julian, but I am learning that what matters most is being part of that world with you. However you will have me. As Toby jogged toward them, face flushed with exercise and happiness, Julian made his decision. The path forward wasn't without complications, but some journeys were worth every challenging step. We accept, he said, squeezing Dante's hand. The position, and everything that comes with it. Toby reached them, breathless with excitement. Did you see my hit? Coach says I have a natural swing. We saw, Dante confirmed, making room on the bench between them. Outstanding form. As Toby launched into a detailed analysis of his performance, Dante caught Julian's eye over the boy's head. The look that passed between them held a promise. A family formed not by blood, but by choice. Of second chances embraced. Of a future brighter than either could have imagined. That day in Sweetie's bakery, when a cancelled cake had changed everything.